Imagine a land where volcanic peaks pierce the clouds, where the Amazon's pulse thrums through emerald jungles, and where ancient cultures weave their stories into vibrant markets. Ecuador, a compact gem straddling the equator, is South America's kaleidoscope. A nation where snow-dusted Andes meet Pacific shores and the Galapagos Islands rewrite the rules of evolution. This is a country of dizzying heights, resilient people, and a spirit that dances between tradition and reinvention. Let's plunge into Ecuador's heart, exploring its landscapes, history, culture, and dreams in a journey that captures a nation as diverse as it is defiant. Ecuador's geography is a marvel packed into 283,561 square kilometers, smaller than many South American neighbors yet bursting with variety. Bordered by Colombia, Peru, and the Pacific Ocean, it spans 4 distinct regions. The Andes, slicing through the center, boast peaks like Imbabura volcano, standing at 4,630 meters, and Chimborazo at 6,263 meters, whose summit is actually Earth's farthest point from its core due to the equatorial bulge. The Amazon, or Oriente, covers the east, a biodiverse jungle where rivers like the Napo cradle piranhas, anacondas, and 1,600 bird species. The Pacific coast stretches 2,237 kilometers, with beaches like Montanita drawing surfers and Guayaquil's bustling port fueling trade. The Galapagos, 1,000 kilometers offshore, are a volcanic archipelago where giant tortoises and blue-footed boobies inspired Darwin's theories. Quito, the capital at 2,850 meters, is the world's second highest capital, its colonial core a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Ecuador's climate swings from the Amazon's humid 30 degrees Celsius to the Andes' crisp 12 degrees, with coastal El Niño rains causing floods and highland droughts testing farmers. This geography has shaped Ecuador's story for millennia. Humans arrived 10,000 years ago, with the Valdivia culture from 3,500 to 1800 BC, crafting South America's earliest pottery. By 500 AD, societies like the Quitu and Canary thrived, followed by the Incas' brief rule in the 15th century. Spanish conquest in 1534, led by Francisco Pizarro, crushed indigenous resistance, establishing Quito as a colonial hub. Enslaved Africans and indigenous laborers mined gold and worked haciendas, while smallpox decimated populations. Independence in 1822, won by Simon Bolivar and Antonio José de Sucre, made Ecuador part of Gran Colombia until 1830, when it became a sovereign republic. The 19th century saw caudillo-led instability, with 11 constitutions by 1925. The 20th century brought banana booms, oil discoveries, and political turmoil, 17 presidents from 1930 to 1970. A military dictatorship from 1972 to 79 gave way to democracy, but economic crises, like the 1999 banking collapse, sparked migration and dollarization in 2000. Rafael Correa's 2007-17 presidency, dubbed the Citizens' Revolution, boosted infrastructure and reduced poverty from 37% to 22%, but debt and authoritarianism stirred controversy. Current President Daniel Noboa, elected in 2023 at age 35, faces soaring crime and economic woes, with 2024's prison riots and gang violence dominating headlines. Ecuador's 18 million people are a vibrant tapestry. The 2010 census shows 71.9% as mestizo, 7.4% Montubio or coastal peasant, 7% Afro-Ecuadorian, 7% indigenous, including Quechua, Shuar, and others, and 6.1% white. Spanish is the official language spoken by 93%, but 13 indigenous languages, including Quechua, are recognized. Quito, with 2.8 million, blends colonial churches with modern malls, while Guayaquil's 3 million drive commerce. Cuenca, a highland gem, draws retirees with its cobblestone charm. Family is central, with multi-generational households common in rural areas where 36% live. Soccer unites. Ecuador's 2022 World Cup run sparked nationwide pride, with fans packing stadiums like Atahualpa for LDU Quito. Education is improving, with 92% literacy, but rural schools lack resources. Ecuadorians are warm, sharing ceviche or a guayusa tea with strangers, their hospitality a cultural hallmark. Culture is Ecuador's heartbeat. Music spans coastal marimba, with Afro-Ecuadorian rhythms, to Andean San Juanito played on panpipes. Festivals like Inti Raymi, honoring the sun, blend Inca and Catholic roots, while Guayaquil's October independence celebrations explode with fireworks. Literature, from Juan Leon Mera's Cumanda to contemporary voices like Alicia Yana's Cosio, probes national identity. Artisans weave Panama hats, misnamed as their Ecuadorian, with 300,000 exported yearly from Cuenca, and Tagua nut carvings mimic ivory. Food is a love letter to the land. Ceviche, raw fish marinated in lime, rules the coast. Locro de papa, a potato cheese soup, warms the Andes, and encebolado, a fish stew, is Guayaquil's hangover cure. Cuy, or guinea pig, roasted on spits, is a highland delicacy, while cacao, producing 330,000 tons yearly, makes Ecuador the world's fourth-largest cocoa exporter. Chicha, a fermented corn drink, and colada morada, a purple-berry beverage for Day of the Dead, bind communities. Economically, Ecuador is, well, kind of a paradox. Its gross domestic product, estimated at $118 billion for 2024, relies heavily on oil, which makes up about 40% of exports. Bananas. Ecuador is actually the world's top exporter, shipping out 6.7 million tons, and shrimp, bringing in $5 billion every year. Roses, which are grown in Cayambe's almost perfect climate, account for about 20% of the United States market. Tourism, especially trips to the Galapagos, generates about $1 billion yearly. The US dollar, which Ecuador adopted back in 2000, helped curb hyperinflation, but it also limits what the government can do with monetary policy. Poverty has dropped pretty dramatically, from 64% in 2000 to 25% in 2023. Still, inequality is a big issue. The top 10% of people earn 35% of the income, and about 3.6 million Ecuadorians live on less than $3.20 a day. Urban centers are thriving, but Amazonian and indigenous communities often lack basics like clean water and electricity. Crime, especially driven by drug trafficking, has spiked, a staggering 4,600 homicides in 2023, up from just 1,800 in 2020. President Noboa's 2024 state of emergency, which targeted gangs like Los Caneros, led to 10,000 arrests, but, it's also strained civil liberties. Politically, Ecuador is, pretty turbulent. The 2008 Constitution, which is actually one of 20 since 1830, emphasizes indigenous rights and even nature's rights. Yeah, that's a global first. But despite these advancements, instability really reigns. There have been 11 presidents since 1996, and 3 of them were ousted by protests. Correa's decade in office brought some stability, but also led to censorship and a lot of debt, with China now holding about 20% of Ecuador's $40 billion external debt. Noboa, who is the heir to a banana fortune, is campaigning on jobs and security, but he faces a pretty fragmented National Assembly. Indigenous groups led by Kone hold significant power, and in 2019, their protests actually forced the government to reverse fuel subsidy cuts. Freedom House scores Ecuador 70 out of 100, highlighting democratic elections but also pointing out judicial corruption and attacks on the press. 6 journalists were killed in 2023. Ex-posts often praise Noboa's tough-on-crime stance but also lament the prison massacres and blackouts, with the 2024 drought-driven energy crisis cutting power for hours every day. Tourism is really Ecuador's jewel. The Galapagos, which is a UNESCO site, draws about 275,000 visitors every year who come to see Darwin's finches and marine iguanas, though honestly over-tourism is starting to threaten the ecosystems there. Quito's colonial churches like San Francisco and Otavalo's indigenous market, the largest in South America, are just captivating. Banos's hot springs and that swing at the end of the world lure thrill seekers, while Amazon lodges near Yasuni National Park offer chances for jaguar spotting and Quechua-guided tours. On the Pacific, Manta hosts humpback whales, and Quilotoa's turquoise crater lake totally stuns hikers. But there are risks, like petty crime in Guayaquil, 1,200 robberies per 100,000 people, and volcanic eruptions, with Sangay spewing ash in 2024. Still, the locals' warmth, whether they're offering hornado, which is roasted pork, or just a smile, makes every trip memorable. X raves about Galapagos sunsets and Cotopaxi treks, but also warns about pickpockets and altitude sickness. Ecuador's challenges are, well, pretty steep. Crime, driven by cocaine routes, 400 tons transited in 2023, really overshadows progress. Deforestation threatens 10% of the Amazon, with 80,000 hectares lost every year. Indigenous groups, who make up 7% of the population, face oil spills in their lands, with 1,200 Yasuni wells still active despite a 2023 referendum to halt drilling. Inequality fuels urban-rural divides, and about 40% of rural kids don't have access to secondary education. Climate change brings El Niño floods, which cost $3 billion in 2023, and droughts are draining hydroelectric dams that supply 80% of the country's power. Yet, Ecuador's resilience really shines through. Community kitchens in Quito feed 5,000 people every day. Indigenous artisans sell $10 million in crafts annually. Scientists are working hard to protect 15% of the world's biodiversity, with Yasuni alone hosting 2,000 tree species. X buzzes with Ecuador's charm, Quito Toa's emerald lake, the Galapagos' wildlife, but yeah, it also flags rising crime and those frustrating blackouts. Ecuador is a land of contrasts, ancient and modern, tranquil and turbulent, rooted and restless. From the Andes' soaring peaks to the Galapagos' primal shores, it's a nation that sings of survival. Through its ceviche, its San Juanito, its protests, and its dreams. This is Ecuador, where every vista sparks wonder, every struggle fuels hope, and every moment pulses with life.